Namo Amida Butsu. Walking on Thin Ice by Gansen John Welch. Living in samsara is like walking on thin ice, where in a trice the ice could crack and you could plunge through to the icy waters of the raging river below, and rescuers are all too few. So, do we really realize and know the dangers that we face as members of the human race, with feeble bodies and fragile minds that cannot find solutions to psychological and physical suffering that life in samsara inevitably brings, where we are faced every day with disability or death, at any moment, perhaps as soon as the next breath? So, if we are wise, we will realize that we have no time to lose, and that now we must choose to commit to one path and one true teacher, and forsake all false preachers who may mislead us through their egotistical beliefs and foolish opinions that will bring about great grief in many lives to come, with no guarantee of when we will ever be free from suffering and unenlightened life in samsara. So, decide today to be a serious student of Amida Dharma and become a sincere student of a genuine teacher, thereby becoming a good practitioner and inspiring others to follow this precious path out of samsara, taught by all the great masters of this unsurpassed Dharma. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you, Amida Buddha. Homage to Amida Buddha. I take refuge in Amida Buddha. The above verses were inspired by the following very important article dated 3rd June 2009 by Reverend Josho Adrian Cirlea on his website. The link is provided in the PDF. Jodo Shinshu, the only effective path in this last Dharma age, based on some verses in the Shozo Matsu Wasan. Josho Adrian Cirlea's speech at the last spring meeting in Jikoji Temple, Antwerp, Belgium. Buddhism has spread a lot in Europe in the last 50 years, and this is indeed very fortunate. But in this spreading, and in the image that Buddhism has in the West, a very important element is missing or is not so well understood. Too many voices are heard in Western Buddhism that support some already established preconceptions like Buddhism is a path of liberation by oneself, and Buddha is only a teacher or the finger pointing at the moon, etc. The established image of a Buddhist is a forever calm and smiling Buddhist monk or practitioner, following a path of self-liberation and improvement. This, for many, is Buddhism. But for Shinran, this is exactly what Buddhism is no more. His life story and teaching shows another aspect of Buddhism, which he considers to be the real Buddhism, the true Pure Land teaching, or Jodo Shinshu, in which Amida Buddha is not the finger showing the moon, but a savior, in fact the best savior of all the three worlds, with Shakyamuni being his messenger, guiding sentient beings to entrust in Amida. What a dramatic difference in the vision of what the Dharma truly is between Master Shinran and all other schools of self-power Buddhism. We can say that in Shinran's terms, Buddhism will not be well established in the West until the teaching about Amida's salvation will be known. In fact, in the West, only the provisional and accommodated teachings of Shakyamuni have spread until now, but not the teaching of his true intent of coming into this world. Thus, it is our mission to understand and transmit correctly the only Dharma of Shakyamuni that is still functioning in this world of the last age. The more we become aware of this truth, the better it is for all sentient beings. The possibility of attaining Buddhahood in this very life is the essence of the Buddhist schools that are so well spread in Europe. News about famous Buddhist masters and their realizations are many, and the number of disciples is growing. Who will not want to see, touch, and be around somebody about whom it is said he is an incarnation of an ancient master or even a living Buddha. But I myself cannot abstain not to look with suspicion to all the so-called spiritual achievements of today's important figures of Buddhism. Seeing all these modern realizations with the eyes influenced by the teaching of Shinran Shonin about the true capacities of beings in the last Dharma age, I think that there are two possibilities about those who seem to attain Buddhahood in our times. One, they might be bodhisattvas in disguise who already became Buddhas in the past and came here to keep on the Buddhist path those who cannot yet have faith in Amida but continue to follow other Dharma teachings. Or two, because we are deluded, we think that somebody who shows more calm than us already attained Buddhahood. But to become a Buddha means a lot more than always showing a calm face and saying beautiful words of wisdom. Shinran mentioned in Tannisho a few aspects of what it is to become a Buddha, and what those smiling Buddhist faces of his day and today do not have. Quote, "Do those who speak of realizing enlightenment while in this bodily existence manifest various accommodated bodies, possess the Buddha's 32 features and 80 marks, and preach the Dharma to benefit beings like Shakyamuni? It is this that is meant by realizing enlightenment in this life." End quote. A true Buddha knows all his previous births and the previous births of all sentient beings. He knows all the causes and their possible effects, thus being able to predict the possible future of any being. He knows perfectly which method is better to be applied to everyone meeting him, and the list of the enlightened capacities of a Buddha can go on and fill many pages. I think it is very important to understand that a Buddha is not a human being, as the human condition is just one of the many unenlightened states of existence. Inside enlightened qualities of a Buddha manifest outside and impregnates on his physical body. So both physically and mentally, a Buddha is an extraordinary person, beyond and superior to any being. To become a true Buddha, possessing such capacities as those enumerated above, is something that cannot be done in this age, according to Shinran Shonin. But unfortunately, people often don't read carefully in the sutras what a Buddha truly is, and instead become easily impressed by anyone who shows more calm than them. When I myself look to the various Buddhist magazines that are so popular nowadays, I always have the feeling of futility. So many smiling monks, sophisticated articles, Zen talks about emptiness, and how we are already Buddhas and don't need to worry about anything. Practitioners talking about how to overcome jealousy or anger, and many other blah blah things. I read all those articles and feel like they talk for aliens, but surely not for me. Who are all those good Buddhists, and how can their nice talks be of any help to me? Did the Buddhas come into this world only to teach these nice guys who are always calm and have such fulfilled lives through meditation? Then what am I doing here? Before coming to Jodo Shinshu, I felt like in school when the teachers always talked with the good children and sent me in the back of the classroom with the bad children. And then I found Jodo Shinshu, which is the only reason why I am a Buddhist. Without Jodo Shinshu, Buddhism is just another nice discourse for the smart and good guys, but with no relevance for the real people living in the real world. I truly understand now why Shinran Shonin considered that preaching the larger sutra was the main reason for Shakyamuni coming into this world. He had the courage to abandon his mask of a good smiling monk and look deeply into himself and the true human capacities. Shinran did not choose to teach the nice discourses of other sutras, but carefully selected the passages that were truly beneficial for himself and this world. There are teachings and practices preached by Shakyamuni that Shinran chose not to speak about, and he did this not because those practices are bad, but not truly useful for our attainment of Buddhahood, given our real capacities. He said in his letters that some Buddhist teachings are of limited relevance, while others are of universal relevance, and that the teaching of the primal vow of Amida Buddha is of universal relevance. To be of universal relevance means to be useful and effective, either for the good and the virtuous, and also for the evil beings filled with blind passions. Saints and stupid people can be saved equally. It is the teaching in accord with the times and with beings, as he also said in Shouzo Matsu Wasan. Some might think, and I heard such a statement at one of the European meetings, that we should not be so radical as Shinran, who says that only faith in Amida can make people attain Buddhahood, because in this way we might offend other Buddhist schools with whom we are engaged in ecumenical talks. So, what can we do? Why should they feel offended when so many other schools also claim they have the best practices and methods? Just look to the statements of the Tibetan schools when they speak about their specific teachings. My opinion on this matter is that it is extremely important to keep strictly to the explanations of Shinran Shonen and expound them as they were truly said, without adding anything to them, so as to satisfy the expectations of unenlightened people from other schools or other non-Buddhist religions of this deluded world. This is because in Shinran's explanations we find the true reason for the existence of Jodo Shinshu. This wonderful teaching on the absolute reliance on Amida Buddha is not just another Buddhist method in the 84,000 Buddhist teachings, but the most important teaching among all of Shakyamuni's teachings. Shinran said in the second verse of Shouzo Matsu Wasan, quote, "The teachings that Shakyamuni left behind have all passed into the Naga's palace." End quote. This means that all other Buddhist teachings are no more effective during these times. To pass into the Naga's palace means exactly this, not being effective or being as non-existent. Shinran is even more clear. Quote, "Although we have the teachings of Shakyamuni, there are no sentient beings who can practice them. Hence, it is taught that in the last Dharma age, not a single person will attain enlightenment through them." End quote. Not a single person will attain enlightenment through them is a very strong statement. Not a single one. This should be very well heard and understood. Not a single person can effectively practice the Buddhist teachings other than the reliance on Amida Buddha. Shinran said it clearly for those who are ready to hear it. Quote, "Without entrusting themselves to the Tathagata's compassionate vow, no sentient beings of these times, the last Dharma age, and the fifth 500-year period since Shakyamuni's passing, will have a chance of parting from birth and death." End quote. Shinran's words leave no trace of doubt about what we have to do. There is no other Buddhist method which can guarantee Buddhahood so quickly without asking anything from the practitioner. All the nice discourses and practices of other schools through which they claim that everybody can become a Buddha in this very life are good in themselves, but they are not effective for this age and people living in it. So they are as good as non-existence, that is, gone into the Naga's palace. In this age, any true spiritual practice, by true I mean any Buddhist practice and not the practice of other religions, which asks even a merit as little as a particle of dust from the practitioner, is not an effective practice. So we should abandon them, because we cannot become Buddhas through them. If we should abandon all other Buddhist teachings and practices as being as good as non-existent, or gone into the Naga's palace, so much more we should never follow non-Buddhist teachings and practices, about which Shinran Shonen talks in greater detail in his Kagyo Shinsho, where he states, for example, quoting the great Nirvana Sutra, quote, "Good sons, there are two kinds of enlightenment, eternal and impermanent. The enlightenment of non-Buddhist ways is called impermanent. Buddhist enlightenment is called eternal. The emancipation of non-Buddhist ways is called impermanent. The emancipation of Buddhist ways is called eternal." End quote. He makes reference again on non-Buddhist teachings in Shouzo Matsu Wasan, about which we are talking now. Quote, "The 95 non-Buddhist teachings defile the world. The Buddha's path alone is pure." End quote. These words are immediately followed by the verses, quote, "Only by going forth and reaching enlightenment can we benefit others. In this burning house, this is the natural working of the vow." End quote. Which if they are compared with the statement about the two types of enlightenment, that is, eternal and impermanent, quoted by Shinran in his Kagyo Shinsho and presented above, we can easily draw the conclusion that not through non-Buddhist teachings, but through the Buddha's path, which is pure, is one made capable of attaining enlightenment. So, if we live in this last Dharma age with all its defilements and difficulties, we should follow only the path of the Buddha and not the various non-Buddhist teachings, which are themselves manifestations of this defiled world. More than this, among all Buddhist methods, we should select only the teaching of the primal vow and abandon the rest as being as good as non-existent. I especially think that these statements of Shinran Shonin about the non-Buddhist teachings and other Buddhist practices are very useful in our days, when it becomes a custom to mix things and find so-called synthesis of various religious beliefs. Many spiritual soups are prevalent in our days, mixing elements of Christianity with Buddhism and Hinduism. But also in the Buddhist world, mixing things is often met, and even in Jodo Shinshu, there is, for example, the tendency among some followers to make Jodo Shinshu more Zen-like in order to accommodate to their personal visions and incapacity to be open to a salvation and faith-orientated teaching. In rejecting non-Buddhist views as not leading to enlightenment and also other Buddhist teachings as ineffective, Shinran Shonin shows he is not interested in satisfying everyone's ideas or in having a nice and politically correct talk with all doctrines and religious views, but is concentrated on saving people from birth and death, which is the most important thing in this life. In front of the two rivers of fire and water with death and danger waiting to strike at every moment, and the rare chance of having another human life so hard to find, Shinran is interested only in showing us the path to escape, and he clearly sees no other way than in trusting in Amida Buddha. All other methods are not real or they are ineffective. Shinran calls us to awaken and do not lose the precious time we have. This is a burning house and not a place for unimportant talks and doctrines. He is clear in his explanations, like a doctor who prescribes exactly what a patient needs to save his life. He says something like, "Do you want to escape birth and death? If you do, then this is the way to follow, and no other. Entrust in Amida Buddha and in no one else." It is Shinran's message to a terminally ill world in the last Dharma age, a world that needs the best medicine ever to be found in religious history. To come to Buddhism and Jodo Shinshu only for intellectual delights or interesting discussions, the radical attitude of Shinran will always be embarrassing or not so politically correct. But for those whom birth and death is the most important matter and realize their true capacities, the clear message of Shinran and his way of rejecting that which is not true or effective and selecting that which is true and useful is all they needed to hear. So, dear friends, make a choice. Escape this burning house or remain inside it, spending your time with false or futile practices. It is your decision. Namo Amida Butsu.